Welcome back. We are continuing with Descartes on to meditation 3. So, just catching up with where we were in the last lecture. So, in meditations 1, Descartes had decided to doubt everything until he found something he couldn't doubt. And by the end of meditation 1, he wasn't clear that there was any such thing that he couldn't doubt, right? He was doubting everything, the evidence of his senses, even, right, basic mathematics, right? Because most extreme scenario was maybe there's an evil demon out there trying to trick us about everything, right? And I can't even say for sure if 2 plus 2 equals 4 because right, maybe the demon gets in there and tricks me in between somewhere in those calculations, right? Um, in meditation too, he finally latches onto something he can't doubt, right? He can't doubt his existence because if he didn't exist, he couldn't doubt, right? So the fact that he's doubting or the fact that he's deceived or the fact that he's thinking at all entails that he exists. And whatever he is, maybe he has a body, maybe he doesn't. He's not sure about that yet, but he knows at the very least he is a thinking thing, and we define a thinking thing as something that doubts, affirms, denies, understands, wills, refrains from willing, imagines, senses, right? And so these are all things he knows he can do. So we've gotten somewhere, right? From where we started, which was like, do I even know anything? Okay, we know a fair amount. We exist. We're a thinking thing. We can do all this stuff. We've got our unshakable foundation, right? Again, this is foundationalism, this sort of approach to epistemology, theory of knowledge. And we're beginning to build back little by little. Now, it would be a huge win for us if we could get back the existence of the empirical world, right? The things that we experience with the senses. This is our common sense world of tables, chairs, my body, me sitting by the fire in my right red shirt with my ball of wax. So um, could we get that stuff back and sort of um, get us back to where we can safely say we know more of the everyday things that we think we know, right? Um, to get us there, he begins with a criterion for knowledge, for like building back up pieces of knowledge. Because I now seem to be able to posit as a general rule that everything I very clearly and distinctly perceive is true. Okay, that sort of seems to come out of nowhere, right? And what does he mean by clearly and distinctly perceive? This is a ongoing matter of dispute, right? Just exactly what Descartes means here. Um, it seems like the rule he's been following so far, at least when he established that he exists, was that I can believe, right? I know anything whose denial would be a contradiction, right? So when I say I don't exist, I've just contradicted myself because something just said or thought I exist, right? So something had to exist. So is that exactly what he means by clearly and distinctly perceive? Like isn't contradictory, right? Or can't be denied without contradiction or something like that? Um, maybe. It certainly can't mean he's using the word perceive here, right? And that it's obviously in a different sense than we usually think of perception, like use like vision and things like that, right? Because that's exactly the thing that he's denied we can know, right? That's what we're trying to get back. Um, so he says a little bit more about what he means. We'll follow him down, and it's never entirely clear. It might be an interesting topic for a paper, right? But we'll try to get somewhere. Again, we want to read this charitably and see if we can sort of put together what Descartes means here. So one thing that helps is when Descartes uses perceive here, um, like he says, oh, we don't perceive the earth, sky, and stars themselves, right? What we're actually perceiving is the fact that these ideas are presented to me, right? So he's saying, and this is sort of a substantive claim about uh, philosophy of perception here, but what he's saying here is like, strictly speaking, what we perceive are not objects in the world, but sort of ideas, right? Just like, you know, when I'm dreaming, I perceive certain things, but those things aren't actually there, right? Nonetheless, those ideas are presented, right? Um, and he's pretty much in line with all the other sort of thinkers from this period, where they take idea to mean sort of any mental episode. So it could mean what we take to be a sensory episode of seeing a tree, or also an imagination or hallucination. For these folks, they're all of the same sort, and they're all ideas, right? Um, so even if I don't know whether or not I'm actually seeing, like, whether there's actually a tree there, um, when I have an experience as though I'm seeing a tree, I do know I'm experiencing a tree idea. I can't deny that, right? Um, to deny the sort of experience I'm having would sort of be contradictory. It's like saying I'm not experiencing what I'm experiencing, right? So again, I hold my hand before my face. You know, as far as we've got with Descartes, I don't actually know a hand is here, right? But I am having a hand experience. I am having an idea of a hand presented to me, and that at least seems undeniable, right? Okay, so maybe we can get somewhere with this understanding of clear and distinct, right, as meaning like to deny it would be a contradiction, something like that. But then you might think, well, wait, isn't 2 plus 2 equals 5? Isn't that a contradiction, right? Um, I thought we couldn't know math, right, because of the evil demon, right? So like, but false mathematical propositions are contradictions, right? So shouldn't those also be now back in our sort of knowledge base? Um, well, I'm going to try to help Descartes out here, right? And again, this is open to debate what exactly he means here. 2 plus 2 equals 5 is a contradiction, right? But if I asked you to prove that, that would actually take a lot of steps. You kind of have to go back to the Peano axioms, right, and to actually conduct to proof that 2 plus 2 does not equal 5, right? Or that 2 plus 2 equals 5 is a contradiction. That actually takes a fair amount. You probably couldn't do it off the top of your head unless you're a math major, right? So somewhere in those steps, right, in that logical proof, the demon could trick you, right? So I think maybe what Descartes is saying is that clearly and distinctly perceive is like there's some really simple um, stuff that if I deny it, it's so obviously contradictory that the demon can't fool me about that, right? The demon can't fool me about I exist. The demon can't fool me about I'm having a hand experience, right? Even if there is no actual hand. The demon could trick me about 2 plus 2 equals 5 because that kind of knowledge is actually a little more complicated, right? Okay, so to get any further here, right? To know any more than this obvious stuff that I exist and I'm having certain kinds of ideas, um, I need to prove that there's no evil demon deceiving me. If I could prove that, then I could have math back, right? I could have geometry, um, and maybe I could work my way back up to sense experience. So again, there are some things that are so obvious, so clear and distinct that he can't trick me about those, right? I exist. I'm having a certain type of experience right now. So if we can proceed by those little steps, right, those little logical steps that are so clear and distinct that he can't trick us, maybe we can work our way back up. Now, here's one way we could know an evil demon wasn't deceiving us. If there were a God that exists that was sort of like the traditional God that we conceive of as all good, all powerful, right, all knowing, God like that wouldn't let me just be systematically deceived by a demon for no reason, right? Um, So if Descartes can prove the existence of God, this traditional sort of God that's good and all powerful, then it should follow that we can trust our senses. Now, of course, we do make mistakes, right? God is going to let you make mistakes here and there, but this sort of total systematic deception where our senses are just constantly fooling us all the time, a good God wouldn't let that happen, right? So if we can prove there's a God, then we can prove there's no evil demon systematically tricking us about these things. Now, before we get into Descartes' proof of the existence of God, he pauses, right? Because especially now at the time, it seemed like totally natural. Like everyone was like pretty much religious, right? So it is right. Your proof of the existence of like the external world, right, in the world of the senses, this detour through the existence of God now seems a little more out of place than it would have back then. But I think Descartes is pretty smart and pretty forward thinking, and he maybe sort of like knew that some people might hope that there's an easier way, a more direct way, right, than trying to prove the existence of God. And he says, well, yeah, I considered it, right, but it's not going to work. So you might have thought, look, um, there's something kind of actually, something about my sense experience leads me to believe that I'm not sort of in control of it, right? That something beyond me exists that's causing my sensations, right? Um, that thing about it is that I have actually very little control over my sense experience, right? If it was my mind creating it all, wouldn't I have more control over it, right? So I can't just decide to smell oranges and just make that happen, right? Um, that seems maybe to imply that um, something else that's in control of whether I smell oranges, namely whether there's oranges in the actual oranges in the environment, right? Um, so does that mean that if I'm smelling oranges, it means an orange exists, right? Is that the only way I can smell oranges? I can't just make it happen, right, with my own mind. Um, and Descartes says, well, just because you can't control parts of your mind doesn't necessarily mean that sensory world as it appears to you, right? So like look at dreams, right? Um, I have all sorts of experience. I can't control my dreams really either, right? I don't have a lot of control over that. Um, but nonetheless, it is not real, right? So I can't. I know I've had experience in dreams. I don't know if this is. I think this is part of like your brain kind of shuts down your motor skills, right? So that you don't wake yourself up acting out your dreams, right? So I find whenever in a dream that I have to like put on socks or something or put on pants, I just can't do it. I'm like struggling in my dream. I can't control that. In my dream world, I would very much like to put on my socks, and I just can't seem to do it. Right? I just don't have that kind of control in my dreams. Now, nothing in the dream is real, right? So, point being, just because I can't control my sensation, right? Just because I can't smell oranges whenever I want to, that doesn't necessarily mean um, that that sensation is real, right? Because again, the same thing happens in dreams, and that's definitely not real, right? Okay, so anyways, even beyond that point, uh, even if we could prove that my sensory experience was caused by external objects, um, well, this causation relation doesn't entail sort of any sort of resemblance relation, right? So, I have a sensation, a tree-like image. Okay, even if we can assume that it was caused by something, how do I know it's caused by a tree, by something that resembles that image? Um, it, the causal relationship doesn't guarantee a resemblance. So, um, that line of reasoning, even if it were true, which Descartes argues it doesn't, right? It isn't valid. And even if it were valid, it wouldn't guarantee you any kind of worthwhile knowledge, right? Just knowing that there was some causal relationship between external objects and your sensation. All right, so that was just a sort of an aside, but it's the sort of thing that you might find interesting and might want to try to refute or something in a paper. So, but back to the existence of God. So Descartes thinks that other sort of more direct route to try to get um, knowledge of the sensory world um, is not going to work out. I have to go via the existence of God. Here is his proof of the existence of God. There's a key premise here, and the premise is this: there must be at least as much reality in a cause as there is in its effect. That's not going to make much sense to you right immediately, right? It's so Descartes in the early 1600s here, so they're get this the beginnings of like proper science, um, but their science and their metaphysics is a little bit different, right? But it's not so wildly different from sort of some things we accept now. So it's a little bit, in a sense, like the second law of thermodynamics, right? So things go from higher energy states to lower energy states, right? Um, So you need, like, if I want to move a pencil, I need more force than the friction that's holding it in place, right? So we have a sort of an analog of this now, right? Cause has to have a more energy than the effect. Um, I mean, Descartes believed that too, right? In his physics of his day, but he also takes that principle to be sort of even more general than just governing the physical world, and he thinks that it also governs sort of interactions between the world and ideas with other ideas as well, right? So, say I have an idea of a pencil. Um, the claim is whatever caused that idea must have at least as much sort of reality, force, energy, whatever, as the thing it causes, right? So the cause has to have more reality than the effect, or at least as much reality as the effect, right? So suppose I have my idea, but I'm thinking of a pencil right now. What could have caused that idea? Something that has at least as much or more reality than that idea. Um, so what in the world could have more reality than a pencil idea? Well, a real pencil, for one, right? Anything that actually exists is going to have more reality than an idea, right? Um, it might be also another idea that caused my pencil idea. So there's a number of different things. So he uses a little terminology that again, that's a little old from his time, and it doesn't really show up in sort of metaphysics or sciences, but it's not so hard to grapple with. He talks about formal reality and objective reality, right? So that using his terms, right? The cause of my pencil idea. So I'm thinking about a pencil. Um, cause of that idea needs to have as much formal reality as my idea has objective reality, right? So this sounds a little confusing because he's using objective reality to apply to ideas, right? And you might think objective means like reality in the world or whatever. Think objective as like the object of your thought, right? Not physical object. So objective reality kind of applies to thoughts and ideas. Formal reality is more like actual things in the world. And as we said, ideas can cause other ideas, right? So it's possible that my pencil idea was caused by another idea. Maybe I was thinking about playing golf, right? And my golf idea has at least as much reality as my pencil idea. And so my golf idea caused me to think, oh, I need one of those little pencils, right? Um, so maybe that's the case, right? But, um, and maybe some other idea caused my golf idea, right? But you can't have an unending series of ideas according to Descartes. Something with formal reality had to exist to start the chain, right? So it can't be ideas all the way back. Why? He doesn't exactly say why, right? Again, interesting paper topic if you want to argue on either side. It's plausible, right? Again, if we do know that actual things have more reality than ideas, right, then it seems like to start the chain of ideas, at some point you had to have some act. So what's at the beginning of the chain that eventually caused my pencil idea? Maybe is a real pencil, right? Maybe I um, saw a real pencil, right, once in my life, right, and it causes ideas. Or it could be an evil demon, right? That would have more reality than my pencil idea. Maybe God, maybe me myself, right? All of these things um, exist. We don't know yet that a real pencil exists, but if a real pencil did exist, that would have enough reality, right? And all these other things have more reality than the pencil idea. Um, okay, but all this talk about pencils, right? What he wants us to walk away with here is the idea that no idea can have more reality than the thing it's an idea of, right? Um, so I have an idea, it's got to be caused by something, and whatever caused it has to have more reality than the idea, right? So a pencil idea can't be more real than a pencil. Okay, so I have my ideas, my pencil idea, right? And that entails, because you can't have an unending chain of ideas out there, something exists somewhere with formal reality. The fact that I have a pencil idea means something exists, right? Now, that hasn't gotten us anywhere new yet because we already know that I exist. We know at least one thing exists, right? And I have formal reality, right? I'm a thinking thing. Um, so I might be the cause of my pencil idea, right? I might be the cause of a lot of my ideas, right? Um, but are there any ideas that are so great, right, have so much reality that I can't have caused them, right? Well, here's a candidate. I have an idea of God. My idea of God is as an infinite, perfect being. Here's the quote from Descartes. I understand by the name God a certain substance that is infinite, independent, supremely intelligent, and supremely powerful, and that created me along with everything else that exists, if anything else. So I have this idea. It's an idea with a lot of reality, right? It's an idea of infinity, right? Supremely powerful and so on. So the question is, do I have enough formal reality to cause that big, big idea, right? Um, Descartes says, no, I don't, right? The idea is of the infinite. I am not infinite, right? So I don't have enough infinity to cause the idea of infinity, right? I, my idea of God is an idea of perfection, right? And I'm not perfect, right? So I don't have enough reality to cause that. Here's another way to think about this argument, right? If this whole idea of like having enough reality to cause something else, right? Maybe that feels too archaic. But we can frame this argument in another way. Look at these two triangles, right? Um, which triangle is more perfect? If you're being honest, you'll say the one on the top, right? The other one is got, so the lines are a little bent, right? The angles are probably don't actually add up to 180, right? Because some of those angles are a little convex, I can see, and so on, right? Um, well, how do I know which one is more perfect, right? Have I ever seen a truly perfect? And no, you haven't, right? None exist on Earth. And in fact, that one on the top is not a perfect triangle, right? If you zoomed way in, just the very fact of the width of the ink or the of the lines, right? It's not ink, but you know what I mean. Um, that's going to cause those angles to not perfectly add up to 180, right? There are no perfect triangles on this planet. You have never seen one, right? Um, okay, so I seem to be able to judge perfection. I have a perfectly good idea of what perfection is, of what a perfect triangle is, right? I can compare two triangles and say one is more perfect than the other, yet I have never seen a perfect triangle, right? So where did I get this idea of perfection? It seems to be a perfectly good idea of perfection, um, but it couldn't have been from seeing a perfect triangle in the world. So Descartes says that the only way you could have gotten this idea of perfection is from God, right? That is the only being with enough formal reality to cause these ideas in me. Right? The ideas of infinity, the ideas of perfection. I never experienced them anywhere in the world, right? So God had to literally put them in my brain. Okay, Descartes considers a few objections here, right? So what about this? Maybe I got the idea of infinite by negating my idea of the finite, right? I have the idea of not, I have the idea of finite, right? So put those together, I have the idea of not finite, infinite, right? Um, Descartes says, no, that's not going to work. First of all, there's more reality than infinite things than in finite things. So if we, again, if we believe his principle that the cause of an idea has to have more reality, right, than the idea itself, um, then you couldn't come to the idea of the infinite from the idea of the finite, right? That's moving backwards. It's something with less reality going to more reality. So the idea of the infinite had to come first, and I must have gotten the idea of the finite by negating that, right? And again, the only way I got infinite then was from God, right? That's the way I got that idea. Never saw anything infinite ever. Um, Another potential objection. Hey, look, maybe I'm better than I think, right? So, yeah, I'm not perfect, right? So right now, I don't have the enough reality to cause my idea of perfection. Maybe I have the potential for perfection, right? And that's how I got the idea, right? I could be perfect someday. Um, and Descartes says, even if you are potentially perfect, that's just to say you're not perfect, right? That's what potentially means. It's like not yet, right? So it's not the same thing as perfect. In fact, it's the exact perfect, right? So that's not enough to give you the idea of perfection. Okay, another objection. Maybe God is like that idea of the unicorn, right? Where it's like I just pieced together a few different ideas, right? A bunch of ideas and created got God, right? So maybe I have the idea of a dad, right? And I have idea of a mom, and I have an idea of the universe. And I have an idea of a very powerful thing, right? A nuclear bomb or something, right? And I just kind of smushed them all together. Descartes says, no, that's not what I'm talking about with the idea of God. I'm talking about the idea of a perfect, indivisible whole, right? Not a compilation of different things. Okay, so Descartes thinks he's refuted those objections. If you think he's done a poor job of refuting any of those, interesting paper. So, anyways, Descartes thinks he's proven that God exists, right? And he must have created me and placed this idea of God, of the perfect infinite being, into my head to point me towards that fact of being able to, right? So we've just done it. It all worked out according to. Okay, so if you buy that argument, right? Um, we've proven that God exists, and if God exists and he's perfect, then he's not going to be a deceiver, right? So he's not going to let an evil demon trick me systematically about everything I thought I knew. So I can trust that 2 plus 2 equals 4. I can trust that the world is more or less as it appears to my senses. And of course, I do sometimes make sense mistakes, right? And my senses do fail me occasionally. I might think, oh, is that a cat? Oh, no, it was a leaf, right? Um, Descartes says that's fine, right? I'm not saying that God has made us perfect, right? We're not God. We are not perfect, so we will make mistakes. Um, but you might think, shouldn't have God made me so that I don't make mistakes? Wouldn't it be better if I didn't make mistakes, right? And Descartes here, and this is a common refrain, right? And people who are defending the existence of God, they say, well, God wants you to have free will, right? Um, if you created creatures that were just robots, what's the point? Right? You have to have free will for life to be meaningful, and so that entails the freedom to make mistakes, right? And that's just in the big picture, it's more important to be free than to be perfect. Um, and he's also given me the ability to think critically, right? Discover where I'm wrong, and if I make a mistake, I can figure it out. I can fix it. This is what we've been doing this whole time. Okay, so you know, that's the argument, right? He's started, this is foundationalist epistemology. He started with nothing, right? He proved that he exists, proved that he's a thinking thing, and then, right, he proved that God exists, and if God exists, then we get a lot of other stuff because he's going to be good, and it's going to mean that our everyday, sensory mathematical knowledge, we can trust that as well, right? Um, so if those arguments work, significant contribution to philosophy, right? We know what it is to know, we know what we can know, and we know how we know it, right? Now, obviously, much of this stuff is controversial, right? And if you're interested in any of this debate, there's lots of interesting literature, right, on Descartes arguments. Um, Here's a couple little things that people tend to point out you might want to address in a paper. Um, First of all, so Descartes stated that, did we? I think we may have addressed this actually last time, but it starts out with like there's a doubt, right? Doubting exists. And then he got to I exist. And well, that might be a little leap, right? Where does the I come from? Yeah, we did discuss this a little bit. So that's one, issue. Um, so what do you think about that move? Is that a legitimate move, right? Um, and then this principle, right, about causes and effects and causes having more reality than the effects, that does a lot of work for him, right? I tried to make it plausible with the triangle example, right? That sort of a version of it that doesn't rely so much on that principle. Um, but it kind of comes back again later in one of those objections, right? Um, that he addresses. So uh, if you, I don't know, do you buy that principle, right? It doesn't really factor a lot in modern science and modern metaphysics and epistemology. So is that a problem for Descartes? Can he be defended? Can that argument be reconstructed that to not place so much weight on that particular principle? Interesting paper, right? And then finally, do you is it true that every little step in this fairly complicated argument, right, of the proof of the existence of God, are they all clear and distinct, right? Indubitable, right? Every single logical move we made, right? Because remember, these have to be so clear and distinct that the demon can't get in there and trick us, right? And you might worry that this whole argument, by the time you get to the end of it, is at least as complicated as an argument to the right to prove that 2 + 2 = 4, right? And we already thought that the demon could trick us about that. So that might be a worry as well, right? Is this if the demon can trick us about math, then can't he trick us about this philosophical argument, right? So yeah, I don't know. Take a moment to think about the stuff, and we'll discuss it on Wednesday as well. And I will see you then.